The CIA is preparing some kind of criminal referral against me, a crime report, to the Department of Justice on the basis of a supposed crime I committed. They read my texts.
That right there is the kind of line that makes people stop scrolling. Not because it's small, but because if that's even halfway true, this is way bigger than Tucker Carlson. That's not some media spat. That's a journalist claiming the intelligence state read his private messages and floated a criminal referral over who he talked to. Now, obviously, Tucker is Tucker. He knows how to frame a story, he knows how to make it hit, and he knows exactly how to make an accusation sound like a flashing red siren. But here's the problem for the people who want to instantly dismiss this. The underlying issue is completely believable. That's what makes this interesting. Maybe there's no formal CIA case. Maybe this is citizen complaints getting kicked around the DOJ and FBI. Maybe parts of Tucker's framing are dramatic. Fine. But a country where it feels plausible that private text can be read, names can be unmasked, and reporters can get tipped off about your communications, that country already has a serious problem. And this story matters because it sits right at the intersection of three things Americans are supposed to care about: press freedom, government surveillance, and the way war always becomes an excuse for expanding state power. That's the real story here. If you like commentary that cuts through the spin, hit like, subscribe, and comment below whether you think Tucker is exposing something real here or just turning up the volume on a familiar fight. Let's start with the core accusation, because this is where people are gonna split immediately. Some viewers are gonna hear Tucker say this and think, here we go again, another giant claim with a giant spotlight. And sure, skepticism is fair, it should be. But blind trust in government denials, that's not skepticism, that's just laziness wearing a suit. Because this isn't happening in a vacuum. Tucker is talking about private communications, possible surveillance, and a theory that his contact with people in Iran could be twisted into some kind of foreign agent narrative. That sounds extreme, until you remember how broad these national security systems are, how messy incidental collection can get, and how often political or media figures end up saying, somehow, mysteriously, reporters knew details they were never supposed to know. So before anyone brushes this off as performance, listen to the full way he lays it out.
So the other day I found out that the CIA is preparing some kind of criminal referral against me, a crime report, to the Department of Justice on the basis of a supposed crime I committed. What's that crime? Well, talking to people in Iran before the war. They read my texts. So the crime under consideration apparently would be the Foreign Agent Act or something like that, acting as an agent of a foreign power. And I don't expect this to go anywhere. I'm not too worried about an actual criminal case against me for a bunch of reasons. One, I'm not an agent of a foreign power. Unlike a lot of people commenting on US politics and global affairs, I have only one loyalty, and that's the United States, and have never acted against it. So that's not a concern. I've also never taken money from anybody. Don't need it, don't want it, and that's provable. And moreover, it's my job to talk to everybody all the time and try and figure out what's happening around the world. That's literally what I do for a living. And I'm not going to stop doing that.
And honestly, his basic defense there is not crazy. If you're a journalist, commentator, or interviewer dealing with foreign policy, you are going to talk to people connected to governments the United States doesn't like. That's the job. If the standard becomes, you spoke to the wrong foreign person, therefore maybe you're an agent, then journalism starts looking a lot less like journalism and a lot more like asking permission from the security state. But there's also a gap in Tucker's story, and this is where the pushback comes in. He doesn't say exactly who he was speaking to. Were these regular contacts, officials, intermediaries, people tied to the Iranian regime? Because those details matter when agencies decide whether they're monitoring somebody on the other end, and you get scooped up in the process. And that's why this story is messy. It's not a clean hero-villain script. The administration line, according to reporting he referenced, is basically, there's no CIA investigation. Meanwhile, the DOJ and FBI can still get flooded with citizen complaints, and anyone can file suspicion-based tips under FARA logic. So even if Tucker is overstating the formal side of this, the machinery around him is still real. And once that machinery exists, mission creep isn't a bug, it's the feature.
I'm bringing this up for a couple of reasons, though, and they're pretty obvious. One is that countries tend to become more authoritarian in wartime. It's just the nature of war. People are dying. The stakes are high. People's emotions have risen to a very high point, to a crescendo. And so there's much less tolerance for any kind of dissent in the homeland. The irony, of course, is the United States fights wars on behalf of freedom, but there's always less of it here in our country during war. So that's a widely recognized phenomenon, and it's likely to happen now too. Another point to make that is worth knowing is that the USIC, the intelligence agency, spy on Americans. Now, you probably knew that, and it's been revealed a lot, including by Julian Assange and Ed Snowden, both of whom were threatened with death for revealing it, but everyone knows. But it's probably a little more widespread than most people understand. And it's outrageous.
And that is the part people should not ignore just because Tucker is the one saying it. War always comes with a sales pitch. We're told it's about safety, democracy, freedom, stability, whatever the slogan is this week. But once fear spikes, the space for dissent shrinks fast. Suddenly asking questions becomes suspicious. Talking to the wrong people becomes suspicious. Refusing to chant in unison becomes suspicious. It happens over and over again. That doesn't mean every surveillance action is fake or illegitimate. Obviously not. States monitor hostile actors. That's real. National security threats are real, but the public has this terrible habit of pretending the line will stay neatly drawn forever. It doesn't. Every emergency power is temporary right up until it becomes normal. And Tucker is also tapping into something else here. The sheer exhaustion people feel with being told not to worry about surveillance when everybody knows surveillance is built into the system now. After Snowden, after years of leaks, after endless debates over unmasking and data collection, nobody seriously believes the state lacks the ability to vacuum up communications. The real argument is about how often it happens, how easily it happens, and who gets protected when it does. Which brings us to the most concrete part of Tucker's case. He says this is not new.
The main reason they do it is to leak the existence of the investigation, such as it is, to the media, and then humiliate and terrify the subjects of this op. And that's, of course, happened to me repeatedly, many times, including in famously 2021 when I was still at Fox News and trying to set up an interview with Vladimir Putin. And the NSA, I heard from someone there, had grabbed my text messages with an American citizen and had leaked them to news outlets. Those texts were basically my attempts to set up an interview with the foreign head of state, and they leaked them to the New York Times in order to stop the interview, which they successfully did, by the way, and they admitted that they were spying. They did it again 2 years later. My second attempt to get a Putin interview, I managed to get it anyway, and they've done it since. And so when you get a call from a reporter who knows the contents of your texts, it's pretty clear something's going on.
This is where the story stops sounding theoretical and starts sounding familiar. Because Tucker's argument is basically this: even if I'm not the formal target, the system is still capable of grabbing communications, surfacing my name, and somehow creating a pipeline where private information ends up out in public. And once you've seen that happen once, you don't just shrug when it feels like it's happening again. That's the trust problem government creates for itself. When officials deny something in broad language and then later admit some narrower, more technical version of the thing did happen, people stop believing any of it. He was never a target becomes okay, but he was mentioned. He was unmasked. His communications were collected through third parties. Reporters somehow knew details they shouldn't have known. Great. Thanks for the clarification. That clears up absolutely nothing. And that's why this matters beyond Tucker Carlson's personality, beyond whether you like him, hate him, or mute him on sight. If you allow intelligence processes to drift into political media fights, leaks, intimidation, and narrative shaping, then you're not just talking about national security anymore. You're talking about soft coercion. You're talking about a system that doesn't need to throw you in jail to make the point. Sometimes it just needs to let you know it can see you. That's enough to chill speech all by itself.
None of this, in my judgment as of right now, is a huge threat to me, so I'm not making this video to complain about it or whine or ask you to send me money because I'm under attack. I'm saying it because it's true, and you should know what your own government is doing, and you should know what the stakes are, and you should know that a lot of what happens in this country that affects outcomes happens behind the scenes. Some of it is legal, some of it is not, including what I'm describing now. But it has an effect. And the intel agencies, again, not everyone in the intel agencies, but there are also people with agendas and grudges and no sense of restraint who are happy to misuse the power they have, granted them by our elaborate secrecy laws, to hurt fellow Americans for ideological reasons. That is entirely real. That's the story of Russiagate. And it's likely that things like that will begin to happen at greater scale now. So you should just know that going forward.
And this is where Tucker makes his strongest point. He stops making it about Tucker. That's the move. Because the second this becomes just another poor me, the deep state is after me monologue, half the audience tunes out. But when he widens it into a warning about how secret powers actually work in a modern state, now you've got something more serious. A lot of what shapes public life does happen behind the scenes. Some of it is legal, some of it exists in that murky gray zone where everything is technically justified, but somehow always seems to land on the scale in politically useful ways. And some of it is plainly abusive. That's not paranoia. That's what happens when you build huge systems with minimal transparency and then act shocked when people inside them bring agendas, bias, ego, or grudges to work. And here's the part both parties are guilty of. They only care when the machine hits their side. We've seen outrage over surveillance authorities. We've seen lawmakers howl when they think they were targeted. We've seen whistleblower documents get released, investigations get cited, damages get discussed, television panels light up with indignation. Then what happens? Almost nothing. No serious reform, no meaningful rollback, no real appetite to put limits on the tools once their own side might want to use them later. That's the scam. Everybody loves the surveillance state when they think it's pointed at bad people. Then one day, the definition of bad people quietly expands. It includes political opponents. It includes journalists. It includes dissidents. It includes anybody inconvenient enough to justify a closer look. And by the time regular people notice, the precedent is already built. So no, you do not have to accept every word of Tucker's framing to get the point. Maybe he's overstating some of it. Maybe parts of the referral story are murkier than he presents. But if the public reaction is just to laugh and move on, then they're missing the real warning. A free country should not be this comfortable with invisible power. At the end of the day, that's what this story is really about. Not whether Tucker Carlson is dramatic, not whether people in Washington dislike him, not whether somebody filed a complaint with the DOJ. The real issue is that Americans have been trained to treat surveillance as normal until it brushes up against politics, media, or their own side, and then suddenly everybody remembers this stuff is dangerous. Too late, because once private communications, intelligence tools, leaks, and wartime panic all start mixing together, the damage is already underway. Maybe today it's Tucker, tomorrow it's somebody else, and eventually it stops being a headline and starts being the rules. That should bother people a lot more than it does. If you enjoyed this, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below telling me whether Tucker is exposing a real surveillance problem here or whether he's stretching the story for maximum impact.